Hello everyone. So in this video, I would like to discuss how Qi Gong has been taught for hundreds and thousands of years and why I've taken on a different pedagogical approach and actually wanted to move away from the traditional method. So if you don't know, Qi Gong is the art of energy cultivation. However, in the Western, how it is known today and the Western understanding of Qi Gong is more so in terms of just the movements that is being taught across the globe. Now, during my time in Wudang Mountains in China, I've been exposed to various styles of Qi Gong, as well as seeing different Qi Gong practitioners and taking different classes around Asia and throughout the world. So having gone through this process, what I realized is that how Qi Gong is taught is that it's usually through a master who claims that they have a certain level of mastery, very hard for a student to discern, passing on certain sets of movements. And really the instruction is that you continue doing this movement in repetition continuously for many years, and eventually you'll feel energy. This is really the premise of what Qi Gong is today. It's like you do this and eventually you get some sort of energy benefit, eventually you'll be able to feel energy. And really, I've seen students go about this for 5, 10 years, for many decades, and then looking into their form, I see that there's really no energy moving in their body. They have as much energy as any sort of dancer or physical athlete. They're not consciously moving energy in their body, and I feel like that instruction is really antiquated. And I think the missing part in the pedagogy of how this is taught is that in the past, there's very much a survivorship bias, right? Where there is an inefficient way of teaching something, and the person that actually succeeded in that inefficient system ended up becoming the teacher and passing down that same system that is flawed. So why I believe this is that for one to succeed in this system, they have to be naturally empathic. Already, although they can't describe what is happening, they can naturally sense energy already. So then when they look at a master performing the form, they're picking up not only the physical movement, but they're picking up empathically the energy that is being produced. And because they can listen and they can understand that, they can recreate that process themselves. And then through many hundreds and thousands of hours of repetition, eventually it's like a blind person navigating the house, and eventually they can find the door out. And that's really how it is taught. How I would approach it differently is that the approach that we issue in the Art of Qi program is more so taking energy discernment and breaking it down into an actual science. And we understand the mechanism of what opens up the feeling of energy. And once you understand the causation chain, you do A plus B, then you get C result, then getting that result becomes quite efficient and quite fast. I would say for the majority, I don't think I've had a single student not feel energy after a week or two of training with us, versus seeing Qigong practitioners doing this for many years, and it's very clear that they don't have that energy discernment within their practice. Why I feel this is powerful is that if you're able to deconstruct the process into a science and you recreate the result, and you're able to do this time and time again with many different personality types, many different students, some are empathic, some are more dull, but you're able to recreate that process, then you can, through that repetition and that validation, it essentially validates the causation chain of what gets you to that point. Now, within our teaching approach, we first need to get the student to feel energy and then put that energy into the form itself. The traditional method is you do the form for many years and then you feel the energy, versus you feeling the energy first. I think what I see is more efficient is the second process. When a practitioner feels the energy, then they would, simply by understanding that new paradigm, the movement that they would produce in their Qigong form is significantly different than someone who doesn't feel energy. And there's certain movements that you simply will never do if you are discerning the energy, because it takes you out of the flow. So this is why we teach energy discernment before any forms and movement. Now, I will say that if you take the traditional methodology, it worked for the time that these type of systems were originated from, right? And you have to realize that this was the time where disciples gave up their entire livelihood to learn the art of Qigong and to learn the art of internal arts. So they would become disciples of specific temples on top of a mountain. They don't have, like today, we have so many different EMF radiation, you have social media, you have so many things bombarding us, taking us away from mindfulness, right? So no matter, even if you are a practitioner, simply living in a city, simply being exposed to society will completely take you out of that mindful frequency, and it would be going an uphill battle trying to learn this by doing these forms 1,000 times. However, in the past, these students, they lived in the mountains, they're naturally connected to nature, they see the stars, and naturally, simply by living in that environment, you naturally become more sensitive, right? You don't have TVs, you don't have distractions. Another thing to consider is that in these temples, there is this idea of, in Chinese, we call this filial piety. So it's a Confucius concept of this hierarchy. So a disciple will always be the disciple of a master. And by that very relationship, a master has a certain responsibility for the disciple, but they're also incentivized to not teach in a way that the disciple can excel beyond the level of the master. So they need to teach quite inefficiently, so that all the disciples in the temple, no matter how long they practice, they can never exceed the master. And what happens is that once the master is about to, knows that their time is up and they want to pass down the lineage to another key holder of the secrets of internal arts, then they would actually teach the real deal to, if they have hundreds of disciples, they will pick that one disciple who is the most diligent, who has committed the most of their time, their heart, their presence to the temple. They will only pass down the key to that one disciple. And that one disciple can then cultivate significantly faster than all of the other disciples and then reach masterhood themselves. And that's how the lineage is kept, okay? There's a saying in Chinese that you don't want to transmit sacred knowledge to the mundane, right? And you only pass it in a very selective perspective. And this philosophy is not the best for spreading consciousness awareness and consciousness expansion. So the mechanism of why they do that is because if you pass the sacred knowledge to too many people and you create too many masters, then the idea of a specific lineage gets dissolved, because all of these masters can essentially then create their own lineages and they don't need to follow the master anymore. So in order to hold the identity of the lineage, they had to create this mechanism that essentially creates a glass ceiling for all the other students who are practicing 10 years on simple movements and not getting much results, and only having this one student that can hold the key. I do believe that in today's world, where we have rapid accelerating AI technology and we're living in such chaotic times, that one needs a more efficient way of going about their own spiritual progress, and that we need to really dissolve this idea that the most sacred is held within the top ranking officials of a lineage, and we need to dissolve this hierarchy into having a more decentralized grassroots movement. I do think this is the movement of spirituality where it's headed, where the old architecture of all of these institutions, you're seeing the corruption that resides within, whether that's within the Catholic Church, within various religious movements, going to war for the sake of their God, and all of these corruptions. And you can see in China, like in the Shaolin Temple, the head monk got arrested for having like 40 wives abroad, and all of these corruptions with various religious institutes, because they channel the power into a centralized channel, and this power corrupts the people that are in charge of it. So we need to really dissolve that, and the approach that we take at the Art of Qi is to proliferate spiritual knowledge as opposed to accumulating power and holding and only having this one lineage and trying to hold that essence on. I hope that gives you an inspiration in terms of understanding the reality of what happens in the spiritual world, and that not all spiritual institutions are propagating information that is most productive for your own spiritual cultivation, but there's also other agendas. So drop us a comment if you have any reflections and thoughts on how you relate to this type of information, what your relationship is on decentralized way of proliferating spirituality versus centralized, as well as what you think about learning Qi Gong through understanding the formlessness aspect first, or just repetition of form. Throw us a comment, and don't forget to subscribe to hear more about the ancestral wisdom of the East and the West, and how they can harmonize beautifully into your own healing modality through the Art of Qi and Wisdom Tree Institute's initiative of creating this path for self-healing all the way up into spiritual ascension.